After 26 hours of failures in orbit, Soyuz 1 has finally managed to deorbit, and its descent module is now rapidly plunging towards Earth. Inside is cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. His spacecraft had already failed to deploy one of its solar panels, and part of its stabilization system had stopped working, but ground control is determined to bring him back alive. However, with 203 reported flaws, Soyuz 1 should never have left the ground. And now, just as Komarov re-enters the atmosphere, he believes the worst is behind him. But he has no idea the very systems meant to ensure a safe landing are about to turn into something far more disturbing. The mission plan was straightforward. Soyuz 1 would launch first with Komarov alone on board, and Soyuz 2 would follow the next day carrying 3 more cosmonauts. Once both spacecraft were in orbit, they would dock, and 2 members of the Soyuz 2 crew would spacewalk across to join Komarov inside Soyuz 1. But there was just one problem. Soyuz had never even completed a successful unmanned test flight. It's April 23, 1967. 9 minutes after launch, Komarov reaches orbit. Through his porthole, he can see that the solar panel on his right has deployed normally, but the panel on his left remains folded against the spacecraft. It failed to open. Because of this, the ship is already generating only half its intended solar power. But it gets worse. A backup antenna has also failed to deploy, while a sensor used to orient the spacecraft by the sun and stars is fogged over and useless. This is a big problem. Without a reliable way to orient the spacecraft, Soyuz 1 cannot aim its engine in the right direction to perform the burn needed to deorbit and return to Earth. As the craft makes its second orbit around the planet, Komarov struggles to keep the only working solar panel pointed towards the sun. But despite his efforts, the panel's power output never manages to exceed 12 to 14 amperes, leaving Soyuz 1 increasingly dependent on its onboard batteries. With its power supply now limited, Mission Control needs to determine whether the spacecraft can still conduct the maneuvers required for the rendezvous and docking. So in order to test this, on the 5th orbit, Komarov fires the main engine for 6 seconds. The burn succeeds, but the test exposes another failure. Exhaust from the spacecraft's thrusters interferes with the backup orientation system, corrupting the ion flow sensors it uses to determine which direction the Soyuz 1 is facing. Just 6 hours into the mission, 2 of its 3 orientation systems are already effectively useless. Before launch, a group of cosmonauts and engineers had reportedly compiled a 10-page report documenting 203 known flaws in the Soyuz spacecraft. But their warnings were ignored, and the mission went ahead anyway. Now those flaws are surfacing one by one, in orbit, with a man on board. By the 6th orbit, Mission Control accepts reality, and the State Commission officially confirms the inevitable. Soyuz 2 launch is canceled, and the spacecraft will remain on ground. The only goal now is getting Komarov back. This should have been straightforward, but Soyuz 1's batteries are running out. During the 17th orbit, Komarov begins his first attempt to return to Earth. He activates Soyuz 1's automatic ion orientation system, but nothing happens. As the spacecraft passes through Earth's shadow, the ion sensors lose their reference. Unable to confirm which direction Soyuz 1 is facing, the control system blocks the engine burn. Komarov drifts past his first opportunity to return. Mission Control immediately improvises a hybrid procedure nobody had ever flown or trained for, and on the 18th orbit, Komarov is to line the ship up by eye against the horizon in daylight, hand control to the Ki-38 gyroscopes to hold that direction as Soyuz passes over the night side of Earth. Once back in daylight, he will check the alignment before firing the main engine for deorbit. But he doesn't manage to establish the required orientation, and once again, the engine never fires. Komarov is completely alone, relying on the experts at ground control to guide him when things go wrong. And when it comes to your own health, finding the right expert is much easier thanks to ZocDoc, which is the sponsor of today's video. Because honestly, I used to put off appointments way longer than I should. For me, it was a checkup I kept pushing to next week, but every time I thought about it, I'd remember the hassle of figuring out insurance, going back and forth over the phone, so I just drop it. At some point, I realized how long I'd been avoiding it and knew I had to actually do something. ZocDoc makes this entire process much easier. When I was looking for a local specialist, I could compare in-network options, read reviews, and see who was actually available within minutes. I booked right away and was seen within a couple of days, and honestly, having it be that simple made a huge difference. ZocDoc has over 150,000 providers across more than 200 specialties, and appointments usually happen within 24 to 72 hours, sometimes even the same day, and it's free to use. So don't keep putting your health off. Click the link in the description or go to ZocDoc.com/Storified and check that appointment off your to-do list. The batteries are now draining fast. If Komarov cannot manage to place the spacecraft on course for re-entry within the next couple of orbits, Soyuz 1 will become a dead ship with a live man inside. With time running out, Yuri Gagarin, Komarov's backup for the mission, relays a revised set of instructions from the ground. On the 19th orbit, Komarov attempts the manual procedure one final time. It's now or never. Following Gagarin's instructions, he once again aligns Soyuz 1 against Earth's horizon, but this time, the alignment holds. At 5:57, the main engine fires for 146 seconds, placing Soyuz 1 on the correct trajectory back to Earth. And at 6:09, 3 modules separate, leaving Komarov alone inside the descent module. As the capsule enters the atmosphere, the air around it heats into glowing plasma, cutting off communication with mission control. Komarov's final confirmed words before the blackout are, "Activated, activated. Don't worry, everything is normal." For the first time since launch, Soyuz 1 had done exactly what it was supposed to do, but the flaw that would ultimately decide his fate had been built into the descent module far before it ever left the ground. The capsule survives the fire of re-entry, and the landing sequence begins automatically. At 9.5 kilometers, the barometric sensor detects the rising atmospheric pressure and determines that the capsule has reached the correct altitude. It then triggers the landing sequence, opening the main parachute container and releasing a small drogue parachute. The drogue stabilizes the capsule for about 17 seconds and slows it to 40 meters per second. It then attempts to pull out the main parachute, but the canopy remains trapped inside its container. Soyuz 1 is now falling far too fast. With the main parachute stuck, the descent velocity sensor detects the overspeed and automatically fires the reserve, but it instantly tangles with the still attached drogue. Unable to inflate, there is now nothing left to slow the module. Soyuz 1 hits the ground at full speed at 40 meters per second, instantly crushing the capsule. The force of the impact triggered the 4 retro rockets, designed to fire to soften the landing, igniting 30 kilograms of concentrated hydrogen peroxide and incinerate what remained of the spacecraft. Rescue helicopters rushed to the scene and arrived within minutes, finding the capsule on its side and burning so fiercely that molten metal is pouring onto the grass. Unable to extinguish the fire normally, the crew shovel earth over the wreckage, burying Soyuz 1 where it fell. Komarov was killed instantly. Within hours, the Soviet Union was already shaping its own version of the story, but the investigation would uncover a failure that extended far beyond Soyuz 1. Nearly 12 hours later, the Soviet state agency TASS issued the official announcement. It claimed that the parachutes had tangled during descent, but that was not the full truth. The investigation found a far deeper problem. When the parachute container opened, the pressure inside dropped while the surrounding descent module remained pressurized. The difference squeezed the container's walls inward, trapping the main canopy before it could deploy, causing the reserve parachute to tangle with the drogue. The same failure would have threatened the Soyuz 2 crew, but the failures aboard Soyuz 1 canceled their flight, ultimately saving their lives. As a result, Soyuz was grounded for 18 months. The container was redesigned and the chief parachute designer was fired. The parachute failure could be explained. Komarov's last moments, however, could not. While investigators worked, a far more dramatic version of his death began to spread. Over the years, stories appeared of Komarov screaming on the way down, cursing the officials who sent him up, and speaking to his wife before impact. Some versions even claimed that American listening posts in Turkey recorded everything. Although parts of the recording appear to come from genuine Soyuz 1 communications, they were taken out of sequence and paired with false subtitles to create a final exchange that never happened. The official transmission record, however, tells a different story. It shows Komarov speaking calmly until communication was lost. After module separation, most of Soyuz 1's communications equipment was gone. Re-entry plasma then caused a radio blackout, And because the parachutes failed, the capsule's main antennas never deployed, making the alleged screams and curses impossible to transmit. What remains is harsher. Komarov stayed calm through a mission that should never have been launched. He knew the risks. He reportedly even asked for an open casket if things went wrong, so people could see what had been done to him. And when the wreckage was finally recovered, there was almost nothing left to recognize. Komarov was given a state funeral and his ashes were placed in the Kremlin wall. Thanks again to ZocDoc for partnering with me and for helping us all take better care of our health.